All right, we're back today, episode 41, Discipline to Win podcast. We've got a very special guest with us in the studio today. We have Dave Rutherford, former Navy SEAL, former CIA. He now has his own podcast, The Dave Rutherford Show, and Frog Logic Concepts. We're super excited to get Dave in studio with us today. We actually just hit a workout with Dave. The whole org today was awesome. Got after it out on the field today. So thank you again for joining us. Thanks for spending the time with our team. Excited to just learn, who you are more and get to know you a little bit.
I appreciate you guys for having me on. It's those mornings like today, you're not working, and it seems like everything that you're doing in terms of bringing the right people together and really the right motivation to get out there and sweat,
For sure.
at 0 dark 30 is always a good thing for sure. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We could go, really probably anywhere in your life, could talk forever, but really everybody that I meet that is a ultra high performance individual like yourself, I get super excited in drilling into, what is really your origin story of how you became who you are that, drove you to accomplish all the things in your life. So I guess, for everybody, it usually starts early on in life. So if you could just tell us, when did you realize that you had the potential to be a little bit different than everybody else? And what kind of drove you to get into the SEAL community in the beginning?
I mean, always start at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we take a lot for granted about those childhood influences. I mean, if you're into Freud and all that, we know everything roots in childhood ideas and desires. I don't know if I quite believe in all the crazy stuff he does. He did snort a lot of cocaine, right? So, but what I do believe in is that the influences we experience from our childhood are what ultimately shape our future and who we become as adults. So for me, I had a wonderful childhood growing up in South Florida, a place called Boca Raton. Parents were originally from Michigan, met at University of Michigan, moved down to Florida to follow my mom's parents. And it was idyllic, right? There's probably 19,000 people in this teeny little sleepy beach town. And, right from the get-go, athletics were a big part of our lives. My mom was a former state champion tennis player and just love athletics. Bless my dad. He was more of an academic, right? He's an attorney and real cerebral guy, but that mix was really beneficial. But it was really the introduction to athletics was really the kicker. Those first, swim competitions at the beach club or playing flag football or t-ball or whatever it was. But it was just that year-round camaraderie of being on teams. And, as a young little boy, I was bouncing off the walls constantly. Right. And that was before, the diagnosis that they want to give everybody nowadays with ADHD or whatever. It's just, the natural exuberance of being a young boy and being adventurous. And I think, so it was really the influence of athletics that began to shape the trajectory that I would ultimately lead to the teams. Football was much like you. Football was the thing for me. So
when you kind of hit that point of like what age was that at where you're like, okay, I know what I want to do with my life. I want to go to the teams. And was there ever another path that you were thinking of going down that you didn't go down, which then led to
I
the teams?
really believe football was going to be my life by 10 years old. That was it.
Yeah.
It was all I wanted to do. It was all I thought about. I didn't care about academics. I went to a real nice prep school and but football was it. And I generated this idea in my head that I had D1 potential, right? And so I was obsessed. Now, kind of tangentially, I decided that I really stunk at baseball pretty early. And so I switched over to lacrosse my freshman year. I was like, awesome. I get to hit 2 times a year. I love it. Right. And I played quarterback and outside linebacker in football. And I generated this profound illusion that I had the capability to go play at the high school. So the dream was I go to University of Michigan. I play for Bo Schembechler, right? I win the Heisman Trophy, and then I get drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers because my favorite player of all time was Rocky Bleier, right? And I was like, that's it. It's easy. It's just like that. Well, so my senior year in high school, we were 0-10, horrible. So I was like, okay, there goes any opportunity there. I did a 5th year high school, postgraduate year at a prep school up in Connecticut. Coach recruited me. He's like, I'm going to throw the football 45 times a game, be great. And so it kind of more focused. So it was more like Lafayette or Lehigh or something like that, right? Bucknell, something more in that level for me. And I was like, I still think I can do it because I had gone to the University of Michigan football camp after my junior year and I won strongest arm of the camp, right? I had about a 70-yard ball. So I was like, dude, I got a D1 arm, man. What are you talking about? So go up there. They recruit another quarterback from Germantown Academy, a guy named Mike Gerber, who ended up becoming a state representative. Great guy. Shout out to Mike. I love you, buddy. But we got lied to. And so we both show up and it's like day one of training. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm Dave. Nice to meet you. What position you play? He's like, quarterback. And I was like, he's like, what position do you play? I'm like, quarterback. And
it's like, shit.
And I was like, what just happened? We ended up sticking together. We had 8 or 9 PGs that year. We ended up winning the big school prep school championship. We were the best team in Choate's 112-year history. We were beating teams by 50 points. It was ridiculous. Mike wanted to go to UPenn where his dad played, and I wanted to go bigger. Well, again, I didn't get any offers because I had half the stats I needed, nothing. And so I ended up getting recruited to go to Penn State to play lacrosse. And I was like, oh, perfect. I'll go to Penn State. I'll walk on the football team. Easy day. Joe Paterno loves walk-ons, right? In fact, the #1 walk-on player of all time at Penn State is a buddy of mine, Rick Slater. He had done 10 years in the SEAL teams, walks on and becomes Joe Paterno's favorite, player before his passing. And so I'm like, walk on, easy day. Well, Kerry Collins was the freshman quarterback. And so when you're confronted by a reality that is immovable, that it's not going to change no matter what, you can do 2 things. You can roger up and take the risk and go for it, or you can collapse. And so I collapsed. And so I didn't even basically try and walk on. I didn't do anything, and just gave up and was like, okay, I've got this lacrosse thing. Well, I just started 4 years ago and it was Florida, it wasn't even, I did play in the National All-Star game after my senior year, but like there were 9 midi lines. I was on the 9th midi line with the kid from Colorado and the kid from California, if that lets you know where my skill set was. And so here I am surrounded by these kids from Philly and from Baltimore and from Long Island, and they're all Americans. And so even a greater challenge. And so I collapsed on that, and I kind of really dug into a really negative space over the 4 years I was at Penn State. And so it was at that point of kind of feeling like I had hit bottom. I'd been kicked off the team. I was essentially getting kicked out of the university scholastically. I'd isolated myself from my friends, was living by myself, drinking every day. I was a train wreck. And it was in this moment that I had my first what I call my first God moment, and woke up one Sunday and had a pile of clothes. I hadn't cleaned my clothes, went to the laundromat, and it's kind of funny. I was an art major with a minor in poetry in college. So be careful how you make fun of me. I am a hippie who can kill you, right? So the idea is you get to that space, like what are your choices? And luckily, through my dad's analytical influence over my life, he would always say, well, when you're in a bind, write out your options. And so I sat there and wrote out my options, and none of them looked good. And so I was like, well, there's got to be something else. And then it kind of clicked. And when I was a freshman, my next door neighbor, a guy named Tony Gronsky from Scranton, PA, never forget Tony, little guy, was in Army Reserves. And he'd be like, David, you need to go in the military. Otherwise you're going to be dead, and he would say it to me like this. And he had given me a book about SEALs in Vietnam when I was a freshman. And I read that thing cover to cover. and then put it aside and then collapsed. And then it was in this moment where that book came back. And the whole context of the SEAL teams is around that team orientation. So I was like, all right, I need a team. I need something that's tough, and I need something that's bigger than myself. So I was like, okay, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop out and join the SEAL teams. And that was the decision I made.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get to Buds from, did you get straight pipeline right there?
I did. Luckily back then, and, there's another caveat to this story as well, too, is, back then there was no books, there was no training regimens, no videos.
Social media.
There was
TikTok,
nothing, dude.
Yeah.
Like, my buddy Jeff Nichols provides like the ultimate Buds prep training program, the ultimate Q course training, the ultimate Ranger school.
Yeah.
Like you can go online and buy this stuff.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're doing the exact workouts to prepare you for all the tests. Right?
Yeah.
None of that existed, right? There was Dick Marcinko's book, Rogue Warrior, a couple books from Vietnam, and Charlie Sheen's movie Navy Seals. And that was when I was rolling on. This was 1995.
Okay.
So in April, I made the decision. In May, I drove home, and it was, I wanted to get it going like immediately. I was just like, all right, Dad, I'm going in, I'm signing. He's like, do me a favor, give me 2 weeks. Let's figure this out. I want to hear where you're. So for 2 weeks, and the first time in my dad and I's relationship, he was able to sit down with me because he was a workaholic 7 days a week, built a huge law firm down there, just a grinder, right?
Yeah.
And he finally would come home, usually he'd work till 7 every night. He'd come home and he'd be like, all right, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? What do you think you're going to accomplish? And for 2 weeks, we had these beautiful conversations that really forced me to think through a decision better than I'd ever thought through anything in my life. And so it was really a unique experience, because there were days then I was like, well, maybe this isn't for me and all this. And he was like, that's not what I'm trying to get you to do. Trust me, I want you to make the right decision. So we went through this great process, but I'm going in, I'm going to MEPS, I'm signing the thing. That's it. And, he's like, you got to do me one more favor. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, I want you to talk to Bud Miller. So my best friend in high school was a guy named Chris Miller. His father was Bud Miller. He was the CEO of a giant real estate development company. They built so much stuff down in South Florida. But he was a Marine with 2 tours in Vietnam. Right. And he also graduated top of his class, or one of the tops of his class at Harvard Business School, built this company from nothing. I mean, like he was like this 5'9", giant belly, gregarious guy who come in the room, blows the room up, and you're like just infected. So I'd go over to my buddy's house and I'd just be like, Mr. Miller, will you tell me stories? Around the clock.
Yeah.
And finally my dad's like, you got to go talk to Bud, because he's the only person I know that's been there, has been to combat or anything. So we go over and he's like, yeah, absolutely. So I go over, sits down, he's Crown drinker. So he breaks out the Crown, big thing of ice, and pours me like, full Crown. I'm like, and he's like, here. And so he sits down across me, he's got his Crown. My dad's over here, he looks at me and goes, so you want to go to war, huh? And for the next 4 hours, he talked about the reality of it. He said, this is what you'll face. He talked about, having his guys die in his arms. He talked about having to write letters home to these mothers. He talked about, he would have, instead of like people in his platoon being these tunnel rats, he'd do it himself. Like, he's like, if you're going to go in, it's about your team. And he would tell me, and he even went in one where, went in, shot this guy, pulled the grenade, the tunnel collapsed on him. He almost died. His buddies had to dig him out with their bare hands. And, he lived with this haunting him for his whole life. Mm-hmm. And he went through this whole thing, and he says, you need to know what the negative is as well too. And I'll never forget that, because it was the first time that I ever had somebody say, hey, this is the potential of what you're going to face. And if where you're going, it's a high degree of what the potentiality will be. And I was like, okay. And I go, do you think I can make it? And he's like, I know you can make it. I know who you are, but you got to want to make it. And that's the thing. Like, it was that real difficult metaphor, be careful what you ask for. And he knew that, and I didn't, right? I was just a young kid and I had this ambition and I knew I needed to do it because I had to change my life, but I had no idea what that was going to look like. And so that was really the first time that I ever realized that there are a lot of people that possess a tremendous amount of wisdom. And it behooves you, when you have a massive decision to make, to seek those people out as much as humanly possible. So then he kind of gave me the green light. And before I know it, I was at MEPS and at boot camp by June. And by June 23rd, graduated end of July, had to go to Bethesda Naval Hospital for a few months, waiting for my BUDS class, and checked on board the weekend after Thanksgiving in 1995.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was April to November, because I could, if I had had any more time to think about it, like I would have been like, this is the best thing to do. Maybe I'll do something else. But my alternative was I wanted to move out to LA and become a tattoo artist. So I figured that was probably not a good idea. And
that was always there for you.
Not the optimal when you're partying as hard as I was. So not a good choice. So
when you showed up day one, and you're looking around the room of all the other dudes in there with you, it's like natural. You're racking and stacking yourself amongst everybody.
Yeah.
Like, where did you rack yourself? If when you're making your little OML of like, I know I'm better than this guy, but like this dude's a stud. Like, were you like, where were you at? Do you think?
I think I knew humility was important because I'd played on enough different teams. To know that bites you in the ass quick, right? If you think you're something you're not, and then you get exposed, like that's horrible. So I've always had a good sense of humility about myself, but internally I was like, okay, I'm a former D1 athlete. I got this. I'm going to crush all the physical stuff. Maybe some of the other disciplinary stuff I might struggle with for sure, considering I am a hippie at that point still. And it's like, so I was doing that. And so I was gauging and immediately learned that was the dumbest thing I could have ever done, because it doesn't matter. I mean, I've seen guys come in that were, on the swim team of an elite D1 Stanford D1 program, and quit within a week. Not because of the water, but because of log PT, or because of boats, or because of just getting pummeled in grinder PT, right? I've seen guys that were triathletes come in and just get smoked because they couldn't stand the mental persecution that was day in and day out. And I've seen kids that never played a sport in high school, graduated with a GED, were little skate rat punks, right? And became honor man of their classes, became the top swimmer or the top this, because they were just hard, right? Because they grew up hard. They grew up on the street, or they grew up in a tough, like I have one buddy, the Sandman, grew up, he's still in, and grew up outside of Denver and was involved in gangs, and his family was in gangs, his parents, and just randomly walked into a Golden Gloves gym, picked up Golden Gloves boxing a little bit to kind of get away from the life. Met this former, I think, team guy who was in there and was like, "Hey son, I think you might have a future in this." And dude had never even seen the ocean before, right? And he shows up, and that next thing you know, he's doing all this stuff, from gangbanger to Navy SEAL. And guy's one of the most brilliant operators I ever saw in my entire existence, And when he came in, he was just this skinny little guy, did all these little gang tats around, and he used to just get pummeled mercilessly by the instructors trying to provoke him, but you couldn't break him. There was nothing any of them could say or do to him from what he had grown up with that was going to break him in his spirit. And so it's like, I'm looking at the D1 athlete and the Superman or whoever, and he cracks like a little wuss in 5 seconds. And this guy over here is harder than woodpecker lips. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go be friends with this guy, because I knew that's what I was struggling with, was the resilience piece, the mental toughness. I thought I had it, but I just didn't. It just wasn't there, right? I had generated the illusion of it through very particular circumstances that weren't being measured against a much more substantial basis of reality, right? If I'm going to gauge myself against what mental toughness is, it's not the kid who every step of his life has been easy. It's the kid who's had to fight from nothing, right? So like, I have one friend, Dan Sorello, he passed away a couple of years ago. You know, Dan grew up, no father in the picture. Mom was struggled in a measurable amount of ways, from all different types of addiction, alcoholism, you know, people coming into the house, beating her in front of the kids, you know, and Dan having to grow up in this and persevere and fight through this. And, you know, that was the thing that he's like, I'm going to get out of that mindset and join the SEAL teams and become the ultimate protector that I know is in me. And, you know, so like, when you're next to people like that, it resets your perspective in a pretty profound way. So I always, once I saw that and began to gravitate towards those, the humility was immeasurable, but also, you know, a little bit of that imposter syndrome was a real significant thing for me. It's like, man, I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
I need to earn it every day. And we have a saying in the teams, you got to earn your trident every day, which is, I'm sure you've experienced a bunch of that stuff too.
So when you're like, you get there and obviously you're with a decent sized group of guys, I'm imagining, what's that first, whether it's like week or couple weeks, like, how quickly does that start to wean out? Like, in terms of guys that, and what is that process of like, really what breaks like the first group down to where then you get to the elite
soft sand conditioning runs.
Okay.
You want to talk misery, soft sand conditioning runs. There's, you know, everybody's typically used to running on hard pack, right? Hard surface, right? Hard surface, running shoes. Now you're in these Bates lights, like horrible boots, and you're on soft sand. And that soft sand you plant and it gives, right? And so you don't know how to correctly run. And there's a whole technique to running in the soft sand. You're not driving, you're lifting from your hip flexor, setting your foot down. You flatten yourself, your lift out. You don't try and push, you try and kind of lift, and the way you move your arms, you know, all this energy conservation. Well, you get out there and you have these instructors that are like gods, right? And all they do every day is train because they're at buds, right? Right? All day, every day, all they're doing is working out. And I'll never forget, you know, Chief Audis, right? Bob Audis, man, and he comes out and he wasn't yoked. He wasn't like some giant, like, you know, he's just kind of this skinny little dude, and his hair's slicked back and he's got these long sideburns and he's wearing the Oaks, and he looks at all of us and he goes, "You ladies ready?" And we're like, "Hoo-yah!" Right? And he takes off at like a 6-mile sprint on soft sand. And next thing you know, you got the accordion comes out. And then what happens is this thing called the Goon Squad starts. And the Goon Squad is if you're not keeping up, because he'll sprint it out, you got to stay up. And then if you start falling back, then what he do is he'll start circling it up and give everybody a break, and you're running in the circle. Well, whatever that end of the accordion, it gets cut off. And then the instructors take that group of 50, 25, however many it is, and they take them down to the beach, and they make them get wet. They make them get sandy. They do push-ups. They do air squats, 8-count bodybuilders, and they beat them additionally for like 10 minutes. Then they put them in the back, and then they start, and the sprint starts again. And they're demolished now. Oh my God. And that's the Goon Squad. And I was like, oh my God, this is not what I expected. I was like, how am I going to prepare for this? How do I even know what to do? And then immediately I started, my ITB got super inflamed because I didn't train on any soft sand. And so that additional stretch, you know, I was never very limber anyways. This was back when nobody did stretching, right? And immediately my legs got to a point where both ITBs were so inflamed I couldn't bend my legs. And this was after a couple weeks. And so I got med rolled out of that class into the next class. And so that was the real moment. Like, because it was most times like, oh, you're not prepared, gone, you
Yeah.
quit. And the only reason kind of they needed, I had come under this special program called the Dive Fair program, which was a medic based program. So if I made it through buds, I'd go straight to 18 Delta, right? I wouldn't have to go to an A school in the Navy and learn a job or any of that.
Okay.
Straight to buds, straight to 18 Delta. And we were at that time in the teams, we were like 60% manned at medic. So they were desperate.
Yeah.
So they needed guys. So they created this whole program. And so, and in that moment is like, I think they gave me the additional like little leeway because they needed medics. And so they let me roll. And so, you know, that was where my first like wake up call, like, oh my God, this is not what I even imagined.
Yeah.
And you're probably too like wondering, because you hear all these stories about guys that like go through the program, like broken feet, the whole 9 yards. So like, how far did you push yourself before you had to tell them like, look, I literally can't even like move my legs anymore? Like,
it was pretty quick on the ITBs. I just couldn't bend my legs.
Like,
I mean, it was like they would not bend. They were just, and it was I mean, it felt like I had, you know, someone with a power drill in the side of my knee, just like going, you know, constantly. And so got through that. But what I did was I was like, all right, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we would, when you're in PTRR or in between phase, you would do evolutions in the day, but like normal phase, you're doing 6 evolutions in a day. In PTRR, you're doing 3 or 4, right?
Okay.
So it's not as much as strenuous because you're also going to physical therapy. So once I got back, what I said was like, all right, that ain't going to happen. So I started after work, I'd go do my own soft sand conditioning runs 5 days a week and a week just to get my legs in shape. Well, I ran so much. And then when the next class I classed in was 206, I ran so much. And one of the things, little tricks was if you were a road guard. So we had to cross, it's called the Silver Strand. You had to cross that every day to go on the amphibious base to eat or to go to the combat training tank or whatever. So if you're a road guard, you run out, stop traffic at intersections on base, whatever. But the key was if you're a road guard, you get to eat first. And so if you eat first, you get to digest your food longer.
Yeah.
So you digest your food. So when you go to because I don't even know how many times when I wasn't a road guard, our boat crew was the last to go through the food line. You're eating in the food line. You go right back out, and next thing you know, you're in the combat training tank getting drowned by an instructor, and you're coming up and you vomit up. Yeah. And the big rule was no vomiting in the pool, no pooping in the pool, right? Yeah. What you do one of those things, and you're getting an extra beat down, right? So it was nuts, man. So like all right, I'm gonna game the system. I get longer at chow time. I'm sprinting now and banging instead of the little bud shuffle. So first phase 1, end of week 1, I wake up and I'm like, damn, my feet are killing me. Make it through the day. I finally go to my OIC and I say, hey man, can I just run a medical real quick? Just get a quick check, go over. And they're like, wait, what's hurting? My ankles feel swollen and my feet. And they're like, okay, go over, get x-rays. Went over and got x-rays, and both tibias and fibias had stress fractures in them. And so,
because you were just pounded.
Yeah. I was like, this is my shortfall.
Yeah.
Like I was good at the O course. I could do log PT. I was good, in the boats. I was good at grinder PT. I was good at all those things. I just was struggling with the soft sand initially. And so I did the extra and I got the injury. And when after that, I reported, and they actually were going to drop me from training. And luckily enough, I had I go into the base training officer, and he essentially is like, all right, Rutherford, what's going on? Why should I keep you? Mm-hmm. And I explained my situation. I don't know. I've never had problems like this. So he walks over to the PTRR office, comes back 20 minutes later. He's like, all right, Rutherford, looks like you got a little Bud's Angel on your shoulder. Do you want a single roll or a double roll? Now, this is my second medical. So he's like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. There's no more. You get no more chances in anything. If you fail in evolution, no more, nothing, right? You're done. And I'll go, all right, I'll take a double roll. So I ended up waiting 4 months that time, getting my body ready, getting my mind right. And then I finally classed up with 208. And so, it never ends. There's never the moment where I was like, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Never. It just doesn't exist in the program. And they always used to scream at us while we'd be in the surf zone, getting surf tortured in that freezing cold Pacific. And you're like, what am I doing here? And they'd be up on the berm screaming at you, and they'd be like, you don't understand. It never gets easy. This is the easiest it'll ever get. And you're like, man, that's bull, man. I've seen these guys walking around, with their cool guy shorts and their kit and all this. And I was like, that's Lotus. That's not true. Dude, every phase you go up, it gets harder and harder and harder. So, the next training, STT or SQT is harder, right? Then platoon training's harder. And after you've done, a couple platoons, if you're lucky enough and you get an opportunity to go over to dev group or to a tier 1 unit, then it's even harder there. And it just gets harder and harder. And then the other aspect of it, I think, which was really unique, is that the more mature you get, the harder that gets as well too, because the more responsibility they give you, the more expectation that you're gonna step onto the breach, right? And you're gonna take the responsibilities. You're gonna roger up. Yeah, I want to do that job. Yeah, I want to do this job. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. Hey, that's the worst possible mission we could go. Yeah, I want to be on that mission, right? And then all of a sudden, now it's like this collective pressure of peer ambition that comes in. And there's this really amazing guy I met recently. His name's Derek, and former CAG guy, worked at the agency. I mean, he's got this concept called the ambition of shame. And it's one of the most brilliant descriptions that I've ever heard as it relates to elite performance. And it's the idea, like you initiate it, you have this hot, lofty ambition, but what is the regulatory compensatory mechanism that governs that drive to the ambition? And in our world, it's shame, right? And in a lot of other worlds, it's shame too. It's not quite as proficient as it is in the military. And I know you felt it before, right? Once you ascend past that self actualization, that self-realization, that like, okay, I'm squared away, I'm good enough, I can be here, I can do all the stuff. Now, what's the next level? Well, now I got to learn how to lead people. Now I got to have people be willing to follow me into combat, or when I'm in combat, they'll look to me to solve, and as a medic, I mean, that responsibility was monstrous. Like, okay, all right, there's 2 medics in a platoon, right? So, the 4 of us go out, we do an op, I'm the only medic, someone gets hit, man, it's on you. Like the whole thing. Yeah. You got to save your buddy's life. So, that starts. So what is the shame that comes in is, well, one, we do the peer evaluation of shame. Like, you will be shamed if you're not stepping up. Like at Buds now, they do this thing called top 5, bottom 5. So at the end of every week, everybody in the class will top 5, the best 5 guys, best 5 recruits, best 5 guys in training, and then they'll bottom 5. And if you're caught in that bottom 5 for 2 weeks in a row, they tell you one more, you're going to get boarded, right? One more after that, you're out, period. You're gone. We're getting rid of you. And that system works really well for us. And I think what it also does is it intensifies that idea of shame. And then when you get really good, you no longer need the peer shame, the application of peer shame from others. You apply the shame on yourself. Like, you just know, I came in, I showed up, I wasn't prepared, I wasn't good to go, I wasn't ready, I didn't do any of this. And, and I learned all those lessons, the hard way back in the day, back when we used to haze the holy living snot out of people. And, there have been multiple occasions where my arrogance got the better of me in the community, and your platoon lets you know that that's not satisfactory, right? You need to live up to that shame, because it's not equitable. It's relative to the level of ambition you seek.
And I completely agree with that. And we actually had a conversation about this the other day, where yesterday, that's like that has gone away in the world, where like even like you say hazing, not like promoting hazing, but like that process of going through like any type of like hazing or any type of like self shame or peer shame, like is extremely important for development in all aspects of life. And I feel that that's happening less and less because, I mean, you see like every trend is like, okay, it's like kind of like the YMCA, we always call it. Like everyone just comes up, like it doesn't matter what your performance was. Like everyone gets a trophy, everyone gets a medal. Like even if you just participate, like you're included, to where that is creating like a lot of bad, in my opinion, where there's a lot
devastating.
There's a lot of people that are falling down to like a substandard because they're like, well, it doesn't really matter because like I'll just continue to coast. Even here, it's like, or I mean, we don't foster that here, but you go to any other company, it's like, well, I worked here for 2 years. It doesn't matter what I did for 2 years, but like I'll get the promotion next year, and then I work for another year, and then you get the promotion. It's not performance based, it's not grit based, anything like that.
That's
so
right.
I just think that's like a huge component that we're starting to lose, like with the next generation.
I don't think
and
it's
whatnot.
starting. It's been a long gradual approach, right? Meritocracy is the essence of all performance, right? This dates back to what the earliest competitions that existed, right? My tribe on this side, your tribe on that side. We've got this roaming herd of water buffalo. All right. Well, every time you guys go out and hunt, 5 of your people get killed, right? We have a whole system in place. We train for it. We practice throwing our spears. We know how to corral the sick or youngest or smallest of the group. We work on it. We train for it. And if you're not meeting the level of competency to go on the hunt, get out of here. You're shunned from the tribe. You're worthless. And there's something innate about all of those systems that are woven into our consciousness. These are the way the systems that we have operated for hundreds of thousands of years. And to now all of a sudden, because of the luxuries that we have been so blessed to have now in our lives, in particular in Western society, we're going to somehow diminish the essence of meritocracy and its relative impact on performance. I mean, it's madness. And what is the result? The result is what is it? When you're not sure of the metrics, right? How things are going to be measured, right? Then what do immediately people want to do? Especially the people who don't want to experience the pain of the metric itself. They'll manipulate the system, right? Every single human being has at least some spark of malevolence in them, right? Carl Jung calls it the shadow, right? We all possess it. We all have it. Some people more than others. How does that shadow become more sophisticated? The more Machiavellian people learn how to manipulate systems, how to manipulate other people, right? Now, regardless of the 5% of the population that have psychopathic tendencies, another 15 to 20 that have sociopathic tendencies, the overwhelming majority of people do not. And so there's an innate natural component within people to respond accordingly to that meritocracy, right? It's important to know that what the hierarchies of performance are. Because if you're not doing that, how are you going to give the person the tangible process to reach their ultimate ambition? There has to be the metrics. And as those metrics have been slowly eradicated, probably, some people argue it was late 1960s is where it began, really when kind of the, the humanistic psychology began to erode, that idea of self-actualization, that I don't need to be measured against other people to realize the grander aspects of my own meaning, right? Certainly the 70s exploded, like how many different cults came out of the 70s, and these ideas, whether it was a commune or an ashram or this utopic mindset, which is, in some aspects, it's admirable to aspire to, but there's always metrics within any unit, organization, tribe, culture, whatever. There's always these metrics that kind of help categorize the different levels of people that are capable of high output and people who aren't, right? And so, if anybody who runs their organization like that, I'm willing to, take the Pepsi challenge of another organization that has that idea of meritocracy and hierarchy built in, and see who outperforms the other.
I think it's your responsibility too, as a leader, to let your people know where they where they're racked and
Yeah.
stacked.
100%.
Because someone could have no
100%.
self-realization of what their performance actually
That's
is.
right.
They could suck and they just have no awareness. And the farther we go into this, we realize awareness is a rare commodity. You think it's very common, but most people have no awareness of what's going on.
We were just chatting it on the way in, right? Like, you know, the drills, we did those man down drills today, right? And you know, you wrap your arms around someone's neck and they kind of bear crawl you for 10 meters. Well, we would do that for 100 meters, full kit in mop level suit, mop level 4, right? Yeah. And you quickly find out who's going to be able to continue to go as you know, when you've got, you know, a gallon of water in your mop level 4 suit because there's nowhere your sweat's going. It's, you know, you're doing out in the middle of the summer on the oak course. Right? Yeah. And you're like, well, why would you ever have to do that? Well, because it's happened in combat before. Or, you know, like people ask us all the time, why do you guys do these crazy evolutions in training? And one of them is drown proofing, right? We tie a students' feet together, tie their hands behind their back. We drop them in the 9-foot section of the combat training tank. They have to bob for 10 minutes, float for 5 minutes in the same location, dolphin kick 200 meters across back the pool, bob and down for 10 minutes, bend down, pick up a mask with their teeth, do a front flip, do a back flip, and then bob for 5 minutes. That's horrific, right? I failed that so many times. The first, 20 times I challenged, I had to do it, and I'm like, I can't do this. Why do we have to do this? Well, in Vietnam, there was a SEAL that was captured, was put into a little sampan. They were, taking him up the Mekong Delta. They were going to transfer him all the way up to the Hanoi Hilton. And his captors in the middle of the night were tired and he saw it. And so what he did, he rolled out of that little sampan and he did that for 12 hours.
Oh my God.
Before he was picked up.
And he was tied up.
So in our world, right, we're not going to make you do something that's not that's well thought out, that's not relative. And what happens and what has happened in many situations, people don't look at their training profiles in a very effective manner. Right? What do they want to do? They want to apply pressure on a person to pull the best level performance out of them, but they don't think about their training. They don't have intent behind their training. It's not well thought out. It's kind of wishy-washy. It's not consistent. They're not specific. What is the exact skill set we're accomplishing? We have lucky. Did you play sports growing up? Yeah. What'd you play?
Baseball.
All right. Baseball. One of the most perfect examples of that, right? And I never got this until I started working with professional baseball teams. When I worked with Red Sox for 3 years, and you show up, there's a regimen to everything you do, right? There's a system, there's approach, but I can't just have you go, all right, what'd you play?
Third base.
Third place, hardest position on the field, right? By far, that throw alone. Well, how many different ways can you make that throw, right? How many different ways do you have to pick it off a bunt, pick it off a slow ground ball to you, a chop ground ball, right? Or running back, or smacking the ball down, catching it with your chest, right? How many different profiles of making that stop do you have to go through before you're proficient, right? So is your coach implementing that training in an effective way? Civilians don't have that. You might have it a little bit growing up. You might have it if you're super motivated and you want to go seek out some deeper level training. Places I see it happen for young people, athletics for sure. If they seek out a private coach for some kind, whether you're studying for your ACTs, SATs, or you're starting for your bar exam or your MCATs or whatever, you're really getting into those elite training programs. But organizations, in particular post 2008, training has been eviscerated. And so what I always say to teams is, what's your training profile look like? How are you going to, first and foremost, you need to clearly outline what the roles and responsibilities of the individual is coming in, and then put them on a training profile, get them dialed in to what the expectation is, then put them on a probationary period, and then test them regularly. The one thing that, we had you're tested constantly, right? Like every day I was being measured with my runs, my swims, my O courses, my log PTs. So my group tests were log PTs, boat, surf passage, then my individual shooting, land navigation, communications, then collectively running FTXs, your perpetual tests, because that's the only way you can gauge, well, is your competency what you say it is? But more importantly, have you been able to replicate the competency I need you to have by the training I've given you? And we got to test people.
I think that people almost take offense to it when you come in and you try to measure all those things. Yeah. And people think that if they do something well one time, that they're good now. And again, I think it goes hand in hand with the lack of awareness, to where like we're constantly measuring everyone's proficiency and perform on a day-to-day basis.
And we always say like you're only as good as what you do today. Like what you did yesterday, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You could hit a home run yesterday, but you show up and throw up on your sleeve today, like that's all everyone's going to know you for.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to our motto in the teams is the only easy day was yesterday, right? And that's that whole pretense of that. So the biggest thing that I always try and do with organizations that I work with as an individual is to drill that down, right? You got to give me 1 inch today.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of inch it is, but you're going to give me 1 inch, and you're going to give me the best inch you can give me, period. So what are the inches you want to gain? Like, how many feet do you want to gain over the next 30 days, over the next 90 days, I like to work in 2-year spans. I believe 2 years is kind of the framework to really, really commit towards getting a good handle on a particular skill set. It's 2 years, man. That's what great training involves, to imagine that you can master or even get close to that within a 90-day period. It's unless you're the super freak out there that's on the outlier, right? Yeah. And those are few and far between. The rest of us need slow, gradual input that we're constantly being measured and tested to see if we're doing it correctly. Proper feedback to correct the mistakes we're doing, those little tweaks here and there, and then the pressure to continue, right? And I think that's what it is, because of the lack of that individualized shame. We give ourselves more and more space or spectrum to be okay with coming underneath the place that we want to perform.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I would say that when you look at everybody that was in the teams that you served with, what was the ratio between people that, this is the only thing they've ever done, to where they just enlisted, went right into the pipeline, versus guys that were already out on the fleet for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years that then went into the teams? Was it more so, experienced guys that would transition, or do you think it was more pipeline guys like fresh into the
dreamers? I was always more dreamers.
Yeah.
Although the hardest dude I ever knew by far in buds was my roommate at the end. His name was Henry Ruiz. He had done, I don't know, something like 6 years in the fleet. He was a SAR swimmer. He was a corpsman. So but he looked like a New York taxi driver, right? He looked like he had a cup of coffee in his hand. His hat was always kind of to the side. His uniform was always disheveled. His boots were never shined. He had a little bit of a pooch, He did not look at all like a frog. And so they would beat him mercilessly. And the one thing, the story that's my favorite is like at the beginning of every day, the senior medic of the class would have to go over to the phase office and report, this is how many guys are injured, this are many where they're at, these are how many guys dropped DOR'd yesterday, rang out, this is what we're at today, this is how many, every morning and every afternoon and every day. And so he'd go over there, and Hank being Hank, he would get a beat down. Like, he'd show up, they'd make him do 100 push-ups before he even opened his mouth, right? Petty Officer Ruiz showing with the report, drop, they would come out, and the dude would be in the leaning rest for, 20 minutes,
Oh my
just
gosh.
sitting there, arms shaking, back a mess, fried. They'd come out and he'd be like, we had 4 DORs. That's your fault, Ruiz. Knock them out, knock out 20. Those weren't good enough. Do another 20, another 20, another 20. All right, on your feet. What'd you do? Nope, bear crawl around the grinder, come back, right? And then the bad days where they'd be like, nope, go get wet and sandy and come back. Well, he had to do that with a swim buddy every time. You couldn't go anywhere by yourself. You always had a swim buddy. And so he would come over to our little waiting area between evolutions, be like, all right, who's going to run over me? And dudes would like dive into their cages, right? Or hide under the, in the background, or like go to the bathroom mysteriously every time at the same time. And I saw this and I was like, all right, hey, I'll go with you, dude. And I hated it. I was like, what am I doing, man? But every day I watched him get stronger and stronger. And it was almost like this sense of pride. You're not going to break me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so because of his experience, because he knew what the fleet was, like he'd been to the fleet, he'd been Hayes Gray underway. And to all my Navy brothers and sisters out there, God bless you for being on those boats. I'm just thankful I never had to do anything other than like fast rope onto one and then leave on a helicopter. I never spent any time on a boat, which is crazy. To all you, God bless you. But I didn't want to be on a boat.
Yeah.
And so that motivation came from Hank, and it came from him, and it came from him not allowing them to get into his head, because the mental beating he took was unlike anything I saw in Buds. And I was there 15 months. So I saw a lot of human beings get destroyed, and then went back and would augment Hell Week as an instructor when I was an SQT instructor. So I've seen a lot of aspects, and I never saw anybody take more of a beating, but it just made him stronger. And so I wanted to connect to that. And those are the things that really I began to recognize that just the dream alone is not enough, right? You can have that passion, you can have the ambition, but there has to be other things that correlate, which drive the daily grind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, that was a huge lesson to learn early in Bud. So
that makes sense. I was just interested because we see that, guys coming into our organization, we've had way better success with guys that have no past experience that we can develop and mold.
100%.
And I made me so happy this morning. The first kid that you called on is the youngest kid in the organization. So he was an intern with us. And then, he was one of his intern class. All the other interns, they're at NYU, all these prestigious universities, but they had no grit. So soft.
Yeah.
He's, gritty kid, went to Pitt, Pitt's great school, but not like a prestigious university or anything like that. But he had that grit. He's willing to do anything. So he's the only one that, we hired. And he just turned either 21 or 22 last week. And to hear him this morning when you said, what's the culture of the org? And he says grit, made me so happy because, all these young guys coming in, we found it's very easy for them to just take on that identity and embrace whatever we ask them to do. There's no expectation of them that anything's going to be easy or that they deserve anything. Like, these young guys are willing to do anything. The guys that come in though with 10, 15, 20, 25 years experience, they fight against like everything. Like,
and they lean on experience. They lean on what they did. And it's like, it's always a battle. And like we always say, for like we're doing it, we have an internal promotion that's going to happen right now between 2 people. And it's like from a skill set standpoint, it's like relatively equal. It's purely, it's a grit conversation. It's like, who's going to have more grit? Who, when like it sucks and we're going through a transition and we have to be here all hours of the night, which one is going to be the one that's going to be there? And that's how we judge everything. Because even like, obviously in SEALs or anything, it's like what you alluded to, like you could be the best athlete ever, but it's a mindset thing. And like, despite what people may think, like in wealth management or finance or any industry, like I'm a pure believer that you can be taught anything. Like you can truly be taught anything of how to do. There's no like special skill that you have. It purely comes down to like, do you have the mindset to do it when it sucks?
Amen.
Do you have the mindset to do it when it's not convenient, or like when you do have to take a weekend and you're going to have to grind and work, or like things just aren't going your way and you're going to still show up the next day? And that's what we like. I mean, we preach that all the time to the company. It's like, I don't care what school you went to. I don't care what your skill set is. Like, are you going to have the grit to come in the next day?
Do you find now people are coming to you and wanting to work for you because of that now?
I think so. I mean, we built
it's getting there.
In our industry, though, it's weird. I mean, you've spoken with even way more advisors than we have. And for some reason in our industry, we find advisors like currency to a lot of them is like almost how little they work, and like, oh, I make $1 million a year and I'm golfing, 4 days a week.
I noticed
we are so weird. We are so anti that. Like, we're gaining the reputation that we are way different than everyone else, to where it's almost becoming, and Hannah's probably smiling over there, our director of HR, she has a tough task to hire people here because we're gaining the reputation. If you Google us on Glassdoor or anything else, the people that just can't assimilate to that are like, don't work there.
That's right.
So we're thinking about just embodying the mantra of like, don't work there. Almost like you guys did it. Like,
well, that's you know what we do. Like, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, like, it's so funny, like during Hell Week, they'll put the bell on the back of one of the trucks, one of the F350s on the beach. And there'll be a dedicated instructor who his only job is to walk around, and he sees you're struggling and be like, hey man, you don't got to be here. Like, there's so many other cool things to do in the Navy. You know what? I'll actually help you find a job. You know what? Today, you just go up, ring the bell. I got a cup of coffee for you. We'll get in the back of the truck. I've got a donut for you. And let's just go. Man, you don't need this. And that's the mentality. Is like, hey, go away. We don't. If you don't want to participate in this, now the flip side of that is the reward has got to be palpable, right? Mm-hmm. People got to understand that the reward is there, and obviously financial reward. You're in the financial services. Yeah, that's a built-in part, right? When money is a focal point, it's a built-in part, no matter what, right? However, if you build that culture where it is about the work and the grit, then all of a sudden it grows anyways, and then the money comes no matter. It's an after effect. And so that's, trying to tell particular people who've been in the industry a long time, hey, I remember there was this one firm up in New England. They were gobbling up all these, older advisors, and they had me come in to talk about a marketing meeting and how they should start to think about promotion and marketing. And I came in, and the new guy from Fernie, this guy had been practicing, he'd been doing it 40 years, right? Yeah. So he wasn't any spring chicken, but he was done. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, what's the marketing plan for the assimilation of your old organization and new? And they go, well, we're not quite there yet. And I go, well, how long have you been doing this? They're like 9 months. I'm like, so you've been integrating your clientele over here for 9 months, and there's no definitive process for that integration or promotion or website development, or even at a minimum website, right? The language, nothing. They hadn't done anything. And so you sit back and you go, okay, that's the standard. That's where you're going to be. So, and what my job is to come in and just like, hey, this is what your operational mindset is, then this is what you're going to deal with. Right. And until you start changing it and everybody agrees to start putting out, then it is what it is. So it's really impressive to me that that's the standard from the get-go with you guys.
Yeah, totally. And I'll say that, like, and we continue to get tested to where as we get bigger, it's almost like you'll see, people almost try to test that standard of almost try to change it of like, we're never going to be able to all output like that, people. And the best choice I think we've made along the way is just not changing the standard for anybody and just be like, this is what it is. Like, you don't have to be here.
At all.
And when people have issues, we're not going to try to like also encourage them to stay here. Like
that happens quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
That's a big problem. Like, again, I go back to ours, and ours is the absolute extreme of the whole thing, right? In terms of our desire to weed out and get down to the most. It's not always the best, but certainly what you're doing is you want to press your people, you want to push your people, you want to get that work spirit alive and running. That there is a common mission, a common goal. And I was interested, how clear do you guys set those goals for everybody?
100%. So Nick and I twice a year get up in front of an all hands, the whole org, lay out I call it, our strategy for the year. What are our goals and how are we going to get there? And we want everybody in the entire company to know exactly where we're going and that there is a plan that we're executing to get there. Not just that we're just sort of working into the abyss, hoping that good things happen. Like that there, I think everyone needs to know task and purpose,
That's right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And end state on how we're going to get there. So twice a year, we get in front of the whole org to make sure every person knows that. And then once a month, with the whole leadership team, we bring them together to make sure that everyone is synchronized, working towards those objectives. Because if you don't, as we're in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland, as people don't, when they're not right down the hall from each other, people could naturally drift and you could have two different teams working towards different objectives. So we found it's extremely important to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction and that we're not rowing away from each other.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
And we've ran into it a couple, and just taking even self-blame on us is where people have come to us. This was a little bit earlier, but it's what are we working towards? What is the vision? And we look to each other and we're like, well, we need to be doing a better job if they don't know that. So every day we're pumped, this is why we're doing this. Down to even CRM change. Hey, we're going to change this. This is why we're doing this. This is the reason why it's going to be better for the organization, our clients, for you long-term. Obviously AI automation is a huge thing. And that's what I'm working on. Originally, we're launching that and people are like, oh, is that going to take my job? I'm like, absolutely not. It's going to take your job. It's going to make you better at your job. It's going to make you be able to stand in front of clients. AI can't speak to people the way that we speak to people, but it can do the things that you're doing manually right now so that you can go be a better person, continue to amplify your output for everyone involved. So that's, there's never a time I think during the day where we're not pushing vision to somebody. This is why we're doing this. So.
I love that you brought up AI because it's the number one thing that I hit up. I was with a group of pipe hitters last night at downtown, and these people been in the business long time. And I asked the question, how many people in the room have had at a minimum of 10 hours of really squared away AI training? Not a single one of them went up. And so I gave them the story a few months ago. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, meet with a young team like you guys. And I talked to one guy. It's like, you use AI? He goes, religiously. I mean, every day, all through my business. And I go, give me an example. He goes, if I have a client meeting, I'll feed AI a client profile. I'll feed him his portfolio. I'll feed in what our initiatives are, what we've done, what we've accomplished so far since our last meeting. And I'll have that aggregate all that, spit that out in a report for me to follow. And then what I'll do is I'll say, based on this type of guy and who he is or whatever, what are the best approaches and questions I think he might want to ask me? Boom, he shoots out that. Then after his meeting, he'll take copious notes in the meeting, he'll go in and feed those meetings, and he'll say, what should I have done better? And AI will be, well, you should have hit this point, this point, this point. Did you ask this? And all these things. And so he's actually using it to govern his own performance every single day. Tomorrow I land tonight. I've been doing research all week. I've got 3 different guests, right? I've got a guest that was the inventor of the mRNA shot, and we're going to talk about bioweapons. Dr. Robert Malone, the bioweapons lab research and where that came, gain of function, right? Then I have one of the top young fitness guys out there who's on Instagram and TikTok. I got to figure out, right? But he's anti-fitness world and makes fun of it and all this, and he's really witty guy. guy, funny guy, self-deprecating. And then I've got a guy that just exposed the inside information that the U.S. government actually knew that it was an unlawful order to force COVID shots on their people, right? So, you know, what am I going to do on my plane ride home tonight? Well, I'm going to feed Grok, you know, all this information, and I'm going to have it spit out, you know, of a structure for me to go into my interviews tomorrow with, right? And it's made things so much more beneficial. The challenge that I see with organizations is they're so preoccupied with the fear of the unknown of it, of what, that it's going to take my job as the number, or it's going to make me obsolete. And it's really that mentality. No, this is the superpower you never had.
Exactly.
To unlock your potential.
Unlock your potential with in ways you can't even fathom. Like my executive producer on my show right now is like, we're now feeding in numbers on the show, which shows did well, which shows didn't, what was the context of the show, what was some of the feedback and the commentary on. All right, so what is the formula for the show that we can increase, you know, listenership by, right? And we've got it down to like, these topics are more, people respond better to. Like, we're still waiting for, you know, that AI thing that can somehow aggregate into all your listeners or viewers that can do some type of emotional response as well. You know, like they do it when they do the like political events. They'll have people that will like tap that button, like, oh, I really like that. I hated that. You know, you get that data, and it's unlimited how you can really drill down on improving your operational capabilities. So, yeah.
Last question I really am interested to know and wanted to ask. You've gotten, I'm sure, a ton of fulfillment out of all these big ticket items you've knocked down in your life. And, you know, a lot of people, I'm sure, that you surround yourself with, that we surround ourselves with, it's always like, what's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah.
Because like, very tough for me to get fulfillment out of anything, because you like hit these big accomplishments in your life, but like, I know me personally, I've already played it in my mind 100 times. So when it actually happens, it's like, oh, I actually didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
So after like you've like seen the world, you've done all these things, like what is the thing that fulfills you at this point? And, you know, if you haven't hit that yet, you know, what are you looking to do that you think you'll get max fulfillment out of the rest of your life?
That's a great question. That's the ultimate question, right? Yeah. Like, who am I? Why am I here? Type thing. Yeah. I think for me, you know, I was a SEAL, but I wasn't at Damnick, right? I worked for the agency, but I didn't work in the unit I really wanted to work at, right? I've worked with, I've worked with, a World Series championship team at the Red Sox, but I wasn't there every day of the year, right? It was only intermittently I was there, right? I've, coached young people to become professional athletes or SEALs or whatever, but like I didn't do as good as I could have done, right? Because maybe they have some other issues, right? So I'm always careful to keep myself in check, right? Even with superlatives, it's like, I look at it, it's like, okay, I did pretty good, but I didn't do my best. So there's always room to improve, right? Now it's about the idea of that if I'm working with somebody, can I give them enough information, wisdom, insight, whatever? Can I give that individual enough to realize that the grind is worth it, right? That the hardship, the pain, the suffering is actually the benefit of your life, right? And that the real grind, the real magic of living is the relationships that you cultivate, and to get people to be more invested in better relationships. And like my 4 daughters, and what I'm trying to teach them now is, you guys are all very talented. They're very accomplished. They're all great in school. They're good athletes. I've got one, theater and musician who's already written 30 of her own songs, and they're beautiful and very talented artists, and they're all really good. But it's like, okay, what are you going to do with this? And hopefully you choose something that's going to be integrated with other human beings that are have similar passions and similar drives and similar to push themselves. But I think what the great challenge now is we're becoming so hyper protective of our own siloed worlds that we're afraid to go out and explore new relationships or meet new people or try new things. And so the biggest thing I try and hope I achieve within working with people is that I can flip that perception of pain around to where it's like, okay, no, I want to go seek out that pain. I want to place myself on the anvil of life. That's the main thing.
Yeah. And I think that's what we push all the time. I think that's like, it's a missing piece for a lot of people. Comfortability kills people, and it kills
100%.
Any type of ambition that you have. So we always push to be uncomfortable. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this was an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much for spending the time with us.
I just want to tell you, I've been working in this industry since 2012. I have never seen anything like this. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you are, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. People will understand it eventually. I'm sure the people, I just this morning watching those people's faces out there and doing man drag down carries and a million like lunges and all the stuff, right? And push-ups and what you're building is really special. Don't stop, keep pushing yourselves. And there's the sky's the limit for you guys. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. That means a ton.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, everyone go check out Dave Rutherford's socials, follow him on Instagram, everywhere that he's at, follow his podcast. Should be some really exciting guests on this week, and stay disciplined. Thank you.